We can get things going. Okay. Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Tourism in a Changing Climate, Impacts and Adaptation Across the Industry in Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm Anthony James. I'm Workforce Development Coordinator with Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador, and we're excited to offer another webinar in this important series partnership with Climate Atlantic. As we all know, climate change is an urgent and growing issue that is already beginning to affect the tourism operations in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we need to prepare for what's to come. These webinars aim to raise awareness and provide practical guidance to help businesses like yours adapt to these changes while identifying new opportunities that may arise. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we are virtually gathered today is the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, Inuit, Innu, and Mi'kmaq peoples. Hospitality in Newfoundland and Labrador recognizes diverse histories and cultures of these Indigenous groups, and we strive to work towards true reconciliation and respectful relationships. Today, we are thrilled to have Sefer Kasavari with us from Climate Atlantic. Sefer is a climate service specialist and be walking us through the current and projected impacts of climate change on the tourism industry, and as well as some practical strategies for adapting to these shifts. After Sefer's presentation, we will open the floor to your questions. So please feel free to type them into the Q&A box as we go. Your input today will help us shape future sessions, including potential in-person workshops targeted at different tourism sectors like the marine, winter, and outfitters tourism. With that, I'll turn things over to Sefer to get us started.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sefer. I'm the Newfoundland Climate Services Specialist at Climate Atlantic and eConnext. And today I'm going to talk about the impacts of climate change in Newfoundland and Labrador and how these impacts actually can, here is the outline of today's conversation. So first, I'm going to provide a summary of climate change, and then we're going to delve deeper into the impacts for the tourism subsectors, including marine, outfitters, and winter subsectors. I mean, there are very detailed impacts that can affect the tourism operators and businesses. And later, we're going to talk about a very simple framework that can equip you to identify a risk and manage the risk and adapt to climate change impacts. And later, I'm just going to provide some tips and hints on how to think outside the box, because climate change adaptation requires strategies, and the strategies are innovative thinking, critical thinking. So let's not waste the time, and because we have a lot to unpack today. So first thing first, what is climate change adaptation? So please be mindful of that. We created this webinar based upon the first webinar, which we had back in, I think, in November. And we're a little bit in depth. The first webinar was a little bit general because we just wanted to start this series. So, but this is the first slide in every webinar. I'm going to talk about climate change adaptation. What is it when we are talking about climate change adaptation? So basically, climate change adaptation refers to the processes of adjusting to the current or forecasted climate change impacts into our businesses or way of life or infrastructures. So we want to do this to minimize the risk, reduce the harm, and potentially take benefit of potential opportunities, because particularly in Newfoundland, for sectors like tourism and agriculture, there are going to be some opportunities that we need to learn how to actually take benefit of those opportunities. But this is the overview of climate change adaptation. So let's keep in mind that climate change adaptation is a process, is an ongoing process, not a project that you come down the line and you just put the check mark and it's done. No, it's a process. It's an ongoing process in your operation, just like, for example, financial budgeting. It's always there. And the idea is that for this webinar and holistically for this collaboration between Climate Atlantic and Hospitality Newfoundland Labrador, to integrate climate conscious metrics into investment and business operations of Hospitality Newfoundland Labrador members. So we want to provide how to think through adaptation in your businesses, in your operations, what kind of services are available, what kind of tools are available, and how you can actually make more a resilient economy, because this is very important, especially during this time that climate change is there and there are other uncertainty factors that we need to become more resilient than ever. So basically, I have provided some climate overview, some climate change overview. And when we're talking about climate change, the first and most important variable is temperature. We're talking about warming, basically. And I need to say that by the end of the century, our daily average of temperature is going to increase. But that increase is different from region to region. And the coldest, or I would say, I'd better say the biggest increase of temperature will be in northern latitude, particularly in Labrador. And we are going to have warmer winters. That's for sure. And the next parameter that is actually as a function of temperature is frost and freeze thaw. So frost days, we're going to have fewer frost days, especially in the eastern side, and because temperature will be typically above freezing point. But we're going to see a drastic change, especially for freeze and thaw in Labrador, because temperature fluctuation above and below zero will be more, happening in northern areas or high latitudes. And winter thaw events and freeze and thaw cycles are expected to increase in general. And but in the eastern side, that cycle will be less, because we're going to have more about zero temperature in the eastern side. Precipitation. So in nutshell, we're going to have more precipitation, and basically in the form of rain rather than snow. And this is projected an increase. But the most important thing about precipitation is the intensity of precipitation. And in southern coast of Newfoundland and eastern side, we're going to have more intense precipitation. And largest increase also expected in Labrador as well in terms of freezing rain. But freezing rain in the eastern side will be less relative to the current level. The other item when it comes to precipitation is the snow, winter rain, and rain on snow. So these are the forms and shapes of precipitation. So as I said, we're going to have less snow, more rain near zero temperature areas, which I said probably in the eastern side of the province, and more rain on the snow days, particularly in the south coast of Newfoundland. Rain on the snow days or rain on the snow events will increase, and that has its own implications that I'm going to delve deeper into. Wind and storms, in a nutshell, climate change, if I want to talk about the science behind the storms, climate change warm up the oceans. When the oceans are warmer, there's going to be more moisture in the weather systems, and they can actually hold more moisture into themselves, the weather systems, and that moisture acts like fuel for storms. So storms going to be more intense, and while they have more fuels, they have this capacity to move more northward and more inland into the island. And potentially for increased wind and storm surges in the southern coast, it's something that we are going to see that more frequently or more intense, at least by the end of the century. So our coastal and oceanographic changes, the landscape will be altered for sure because we're going to have sea level rise and we are going to have coastal flood. By the end of the century, it is projected that we're going to have different figures for different parts of the province. Perhaps in the southern Newfoundland, you're going to see that higher than, for example, central Labrador. But the sea level rise can bring other issues, can bring coastal erosion, for example. And increased erosion rates is expected, particularly in unconsolidated cliffs and beaches. And extreme weather events and intensified precipitation can actually accelerate this erosion process. In terms of changes in the ocean, there are different changes are happening simultaneously that can actually create some impacts. First of all, temperature is increasing. So it means that we're going to have a rise in temperature of the ocean in all vertical layers of the water. And salinity is actually is expected to reduce due to heavy precipitation and ice melts. Because of temperature changes, salinity level changes, we're going to have a reduced vertical mix in the water, and that actually can limit the supply, nutrient supply from deep waters that can affect our fisheries, that can affect our tourism, can affect in the species distribution. And due to those initial factors that I mentioned, we're going to have dissolved oxygen level will decline. So the other outcome will be acidity. Ocean acidity is expected to increase. And something that it is very important for tourism operators is icebergs. So we are famous for having icebergs, iconic and scenic pictures of icebergs. We are going to see perhaps there's a likelihood of reduction of iceberg, sightseeing in Newfoundland and Labrador due to climate change. And what will happen for our terrestrial, landscapes, our ecosystem? First of all, when we are talking about extreme precipitation, it means that you're going to have runoff, and that runoff can degrade water quality or river quality. And due to increase in temperature, we are going to see changes in the river as well, in terms of their ecosystem or living organism in the river. And the other factor is ice jam flooding. May become more frequent, and the seasonality of ice jam flooding might be shifted. So because we're going to have more increased flows during freeze-off periods, and that definitely can impact our infrastructure as well. And the other factor is the other impact that we need to talk about is the impacts on our terrestrial ecosystems. So when temperature is changing, we are going to see altered habitats that we can have more invasive species, pathogens, and pests. And that can actually open another window for agriculture because new species will be introduced, adaptable to new climate. In terms of marine species, some species will migrate north, which can introduce, some fisheries opportunities in northern latitudes, or might actually alter the routes for tourism operation. So yeah, species will migrate north due to changes in temperature and marine ecosystem. Wildfire, so it is not it is not impossible to think that drier condition may contribute to increased likelihood of wildfire and wildfire activity. It's something that the picture on the right side is it happened 3 years ago. We're 2025 right now. In 2022, we had a central wildfire. Last year, we had wildfire in Labrador City. So yeah, wildfire likelihood is expected to increase in eastern Canada and particularly in the Atlantic Canada and particularly in period of droughts in summertime. But in the next phase, I'm going to talk about what these impacts mean for operators, for tourism operators. So we have three sectors. I've listed three sectors, subsectors: marine, winter, and outfitters. I'm going to talk about a little more in details at what this means when we are talking about temperature. So you may hear me repeating some keywords for each subsectors: cancellation, uh, reducing quality, supply chain disruption, power outages, more maintenance, which means higher cost. So these, impacts or these adverse impacts are actually propagated across all the board. But in detail, I'm going to talk about it. When you're talking about temperature, so a guest, will experience some discomfort or heat stress, and staff might actually have some safety concerns, especially in the marine subsector. And that means when you have higher temperatures, you need cooling devices. So that means a new cost, at least a new cost for Newfoundland. And shift in marine wildlife distribution can impact wildlife tours and attractions. So you might need to find new sites for example, boat rides or for whale watching. And that means that perhaps we need to have some we need to adjust our operating system or relocate our operations. The next piece is precipitation in the marine subsector. So again, increased tour cancellation due to adverse weather impacts. This is something that we should expect, and reduced quality of guest experiences during rainy days. Health and safety during flooding and road closure and washout is something that it's not secret to anybody. So that would be something to consider. And damages to tourism facility, which again needs repairs, and that means additional cost. And power and communication infrastructure might be impacted by intense precipitation, and that can affect our operations. So all of these impacts might actually reduce our revenue if you don't change or if you don't adapt to these changes. Sea level rise in marine subsector, it's very important for those areas that are low-lying, our coastal tourism infrastructure is there. Our docks and wharves can be impacted, and the structural damages is something that can actually reduce the usability of the long-term usability. And it's perhaps in mid-term or long-term, there will be to relocate this infrastructure or redesign of this infrastructure. So again, these are impacts of sea level rise. And sea level rise and intense precipitation can provide coastal erosion, higher coastal erosion rate that can actually impact our coastal trails and scenic areas. And that can reduce the guests' experiences. Increased costs for repairing these trails and maintaining coastal facilities will be another factor to consider. And loss of habitat that supports ecotourism, for example, bird nesting areas. And again, safety concerns during, in the eroded areas is another concern. This is something that you experience areas, for example, in Fairyland. In the marine subsector, oceanography or changes in the ocean as I said, we might have shifts in the marine species distribution. So that can affect our operation in the marine subsector. That can actually impact the route of icebergs and might impact our market. And water quality might be impacted. That can reduce our recreational activity period. That's something we need to consider when we are in the planning zone. And wind and the storm, well, it's not secret to anybody. It means cancellation. It means damage to tourism infrastructures. It means safety concerns and travel, disruptions overall. And you might need to, postpone your activities during, storms. But for winter subsector, temperature plays a very important role. So basically, as I said, in many areas in Newfoundland, we're going to see less snow in the future, or I would say poor snow conditions, because we're going to have rain on the snow or less snow accumulation. And poor snow conditions affects our activities like skiing or snowmobile. And the season of winter season activities can be reduced, and that can reduce the revenue. And safety risk will be a new risk because, for example, those activities that rely on ice, we're going to have less thicker ice, and that can be another important item to consider. And winter melting events can impact trail grooming and the snow quality. And these are the impacts that can be created by elevated temperature. For the precipitation, I actually categorized the two different categories because precipitation is a little bit tricky to understand it. First of all, rain and freezing rain. Freezing rain means hazard because it can create, ice buildup on trails, slopes, and ski hills. And we are going to have more extended closures due to unsafe conditions and structural damages to ice flow of freezing rain. And that means, again, maintenance. And maintenance means additional cost. And power outages, when we have freezing rain or ice buildup on our infrastructures, especially our telecommunication infrastructure, our utilities infrastructures, that can have outages. But for total seasonal snow or winter rain or rain on snow, that can impact the quality of trail, or that can impact the functionality of that ski slope. And perhaps when we have more intense precipitation, we are going to have washout incidents that can actually, shut down the trail or shut down the roads that provide access to those sites. Again, the wind and the winter storms for winter subsector, lots of shutdown, lots of delays, and sometimes down trees or debris on trails, can disrupt the operation or guest experiences, or even sometimes safety concerns. And again, winter storms, something that we actually experience now, it means reduced visibility. And again, power and communication infrastructure can be disrupted to high wind. These are the items that can affect our activity for winter. And for outfitters, temperature is a very important piece because, first of all, there is a health and safety concern for both visitors and the staff due to heat stress. And exposure to new pests and pathogens is something, for example, ticks. This is something to consider before even planning. And unreliable angling season caused by changes in water temperature and water quality is something that we need to consider when we want to invest or we want to go on tours for angling. And heat stress can actually impact the marine or riverine wildlife. Fish can be impacted by water temperature, or even other species can be terrestrial species can be impacted by heat stress, and that can actually change the species distribution. That also lead to reduce availability of targeted species. So it means that you need to whether change the season of hunting or fishing, or you need to be prepared for this. For the precipitation, again, rain and freezing rain is something that travel delays is something that we need to expect, and disruption in the supply chain for outfitters' equipments. And reduced quality of gas experience during heavy rain is something that it's no secret to anybody, but we might actually experience the frequency of those events. And some damage to outfitting facilities from flooding or ice buildup or structural strain can be projected. But snow and winter rain and rain on the snow, so that causes runoff into lakes and rivers, and that can lead to lower quality of water, and that impacts fish habitat, which is a critical piece for angling operations. Melting events can wash out the trails or have some infrastructure damages. All of these need, some of them can actually maintain, and we can have some repairs, but that means additional cost. And for outfitters, ice jams and river flooding is something that might see, again, the seasonality might be different, but it can actually undermine lodges and trails or access points. And coastal habitats, for example, birdnest, which is a critical component for ecotourism activities, can be damaged. And again, safety risk for visitors during excursions near rivers that are prone to flooding can be a safety risk. And again, wind and storms means slower operation, means delays, means cancellations, means structural damages to our infrastructures, and means disruptions in power and utility and safety concerns. So it's no secret to anybody that wind and storms are, snow means, or storm means a slow, but these are the facts that we need to consider. But now we can talk about the areas that, what we can do as tourist operators. I do not have climate change science, but I want to make my, business resilient. What can I do, basically? I know that these changes are coming, and that's a legit question. Basically, climate change adaptation, as I said, it's a process, it's a cycle. And it's, in nutshell, in a very plain language, it has 5 steps. Everybody can use that. It's a risk management framework. By this easy 5-step framework, you can understand the risk and you can take action. But it needs cooperation, it needs collaboration. Sometimes can be frustrating, and that's where Hospitality, Newfoundland, Labrador, and Climate Atlantic, where that can actually help you. So basically, in the first step, you need to conduct a climate risk assessment for your operation, for your business. The first thing is that you identify impacts that are specific to your operation in Newfoundland and Labrador. Those impacts or those risks can be physical, just like the extreme weather events, sea level rise, or coastal erosion, or it could be a business impact, increased costs for example, maintenance or operational disruptions, or a reduced visitor numbers, and safety risk for your guests and your staff. So you can categorize those risks. And in the second piece, you can engage to gather insights from your peers, from your partners, or from your institutions or associations that like Hospitality for Labrador, to gain insights and use the available tools like climate risk assessment tool available on the Hospitality and Labrador website to prioritize a specific risk to your region and your business. That needs a little bit of patience and time to understand this, and we are here to support you for this piece specifically. The second piece is that when you conduct your climate risk assessment, you need to evaluate potential climate actions. It's a cost-benefit analysis decision. So there might be some short-term, medium-term, long-term actions. So you need to actually understand what are the costs, what are the benefits of taking these actions. Shall I need to upgrade my infrastructure to withstand the weathers? Or I need to actually adjust my operations by diversifying offering, or change my business calendars, or implement some safety protocols for my guests and staff. Or perhaps I can explore partnerships with other operators, or with scientific organizations, or with Hospitality of Newfoundland and Labrador. So there are different actions that needs thinking out of box. And that's where we can actually work together to identify those specific actions. After that, you re-engage with your stakeholders. You learn from others, and you actually share your insight, because it takes a community to adapt to climate change. And it's a whole community effort. It's not one person or one organization's effort. You need to have collaboration and have communication. Particularly Hospitality of Labrador in this piece is very interested and keen on helping their members. Climate Atlantic provides lots of resources for this specific purpose. So collaboration is the big piece, and communication is the big piece. And the fourth step is set clear and measurable goals. So when you do a cost benefit, when you understand that, okay, this is my risk tolerance, these are the physical and business risks. I can do this, I can't do that. You narrow it down the actions to some top 3, top 4, top 5 actions that you are able to handle those actions. Could be sometimes very easy. Could be assign roles within your team and implementing adaptation measures. Could improve, coordination between your departments or your staff or your marketing operations. Could be establishing, measurable goals such as reducing cancellation. You can understand. Okay, for example, this year I have 10, days of cancellation, comparing to last year, which was 20. For example, it's a progress. And you can track this progress using a kind of a key performance matrix or key performance indicators to understand your, operation, to understand your guest satisfaction relative to, adverse weather impacts. So sometimes you are more ambitious and you want to actually, change your investment to a more moving forward type of business that can be, utilized in new climate. So it all depends. You can understand these actions when you have conversations in for example, workshop, in a one-on-one setting. This is an ongoing process. It's not something that you can understand it overnight. This is, as I said, adaptation is a process. And the last piece of adaptation is monitoring and adjust. So it's a cycle, it's a process. It starts again. You regularly review against your goals. You want to see that how successful you were, meeting those criteria or goals, and then you can update your risk assessment based on the new findings and refine your actions and provide, updates to your partners or stakeholders. They can learn from you as well. So this is a very important piece, because then, for example, 2 years later, 3 years later, you can update your risk assessment to understand maybe there is new risk that I actually missed in the first step, but I need to review my risk assessment again and adjust my new goals. But in a nutshell, I want to provide some examples. What is it like? For example, for winter tourism, the current operations in Newfoundland and Labrador basically is skiing, snowmobiling, ice fishing. There might be more, activities, but I just bring the most, iconic example. But maybe I can actually think out of box and say, okay, what I can do that it is adaptable and sustainable to climate change. Some newer options. For example, I can diversify my winter activities. I can introduce activity that is less dependent on consistent snow cover, such as winter hiking or fat biking. I can do some winter or cultural winter activities that develop activities, indoor cultural experiences, showcasing, for example, Newfoundland's and Labrador winter traditions and history, or some wellness retreats. Create packages combining indoor spa treatments with outdoor activities adaptable to varying weather conditions. So it is very different. It varies, significantly based on your, you know, uh, capacity, based on your risk tolerance. For outfitters, the current operations are, for example, hunting, fishing, and wilderness expeditions. But you can, for example, introduce year-round wilderness experiences, expand offerings to introduce non-snow dependent activities like bird watching or photography tours or eco-lodge development. You can create sustainable off-grid accommodations that showcase adaptations to changing environment or showcase sustainability. And climate change education tours offer, again, guided expeditions focusing on observing and documenting climate change impacts in Newfoundland and Labrador and in Newfoundland's wilderness. So you can actually alter, you can be more, creative and innovative. And adventurous sports like, rock climbing, mountain biking, or zip lining to capitalize on potentially longer snow-free seasons. So this is a new opportunity. And for marine subsectors, current operations are boat tours, whale watching, iceberg viewing, but you can extend the season tours because we're going to have winter temperatures. Our operators can extend their season beyond traditional summer month, but perhaps you need to explore newer sites to, for example, witness whales. Whales might not be available in routes or sites that you actually are witnessing these days. Ecotourism focus is something that you develop tours highlighting climate change impacts on marine ecosystem. And you can actually attract environmentally conscious travelers. And coastal exploration is something that you can offer kayaking or stand-up paddleboarding tours to explore, newly accessible coastal areas. And marine conservation experiences is that you partner with research institutes to offer citizen science expeditions, allowing tourists to participate in marine conservation efforts. So the list is ongoing. I just brought some, examples of how it works. When we sit together and work together, we can provide more insights and can understand that how actually climate change impacts you and how we can actually be more innovative. So the last slide on my presentation today is that I want to ask you some questions. I want to ask yourself some questions. Are you ready to adapt? Do you think about climate change a risk in your operations? Because basically, investors and business owners, the risk are financial risk or human resources risks or supply chain risk. But is climate change is it a risk for you? Is it a new risk for you? Because I wanted just to mention that other sectors, other strategic sectors globally, they are actually implementing climate risk into their portfolio. They measure it somehow and they capitalize on that or they minimize it. So I think it's time for tourist operators to understand what are their specific risks, learn the strategies to minimize those potential risks and actually take benefit of opportunities. So this is just the beginning of this conversation, and I would love to invite you to reach out for more information. Reach out to Anthony, Hospitality Info Labrador, or reach out to me personally. Here is my email address. We can work together If you are interested, we can have in-person workshops, we can have virtual workshops, or we can have one-on-one conversations virtually to talk about your climate risk, to talk about the resiliency of climate change adaptation in tourism sector. Because tourism, on one hand, is a very adaptable sector. It can easily adapt to new changes. And Newfoundland and Labrador can actually learn and can take benefits of the changes of climate, impacts in future. And if they minimize the potential risk, it can be a much more profitable sector. So I'll be quiet now. I'll get back to you, Anthony. I don't know how much time we have left, but perhaps we can I'll see if there's any questions or any conversations. Or yeah.
Thank you, Stepher. Thank you so much for that insightful and timely presentation. And obviously, it's clear that climate change is not just an environmental issue, but it's a business one too. And I guess always being proactive is essential to safeguarding and growing the industry. We will move now to a Q&A portion of today's webinar. Please type your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll address as many as time allows. We'll as they come in, we can provide them and put them to Zephyr. Give a minute. Okay. Look like we got a quiet bunch.
Yeah, I see some hands were raised during the conversation, but
earlier on, yeah, there were. Just check the chat box. No, everybody's very quiet today. Oh, that's well, not to me. I take that as a positive that some valuable information and detailed information was passed on. And as well, just want to take a moment before we continue, or while you're typing any questions or anything you want thinking of them, to acknowledge the thanks of Juanita Ford, Chief Project Officer here at Hospitality NL, for her support and technical support in the back end to make it look like we actually know what we're doing up here on the front end. So thank you, Juanita, for that. And if there are no questions coming through, I'll just go ahead and wrap up and give you a few minutes of your day back to you. But thank you, Zephyr, again, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. We hope the webinar has provided you with valuable insights on how climate change might affect your business and some steps you can take to adapt. As Zephyr mentioned, there are real opportunities here as well as challenges, and it's crucial that we begin the planning now. Hospitality NL, in partnership with Climate Atlantic, will continue to support you as we explore these topics in greater detail in future sessions and workshops. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with some key takeaways and additional resources. So be sure to keep an eye on your inbox. And as well, I think, Zephyr, you gave us permission. We can forward your presentation out to participants as well. And if you have any further questions or thoughts on what you'd like to see in future sessions, don't hesitate to reach out. And as we'd like to build on this session and even to delve more into specific subsectors. And we are prepared, and the Zephyr, I think, is available to, if you want to get together for more face-to-face in person, delve a little deeper on a specific subsector. That's something we can look at facilitating and working with you on. So thank again for your participation. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Stay safe, and let's keep working together to adapt and thrive in this changing climate. Enjoy the rest of your day, people. 1 second. Okay, is this L?